Molecules are fundamental units of matter formed when two or more atoms are chemically bonded together and act as a single entity. These bonds arise from interactions between valence electrons as atoms share electrons to achieve lower energy and greater stability. Molecules may consist of the same type of atoms, such as oxygen gas, O2, or different types of atoms, such as water, H2O. The specific way atoms are bonded determines a molecule's structure, including bond lengths, bond angles, and overall shape. This molecular structure plays a crucial role in determining physical and chemical properties, such as boiling point, solubility, and reactivity. The behavior of molecules can be understood by examining how electrons are arranged and how atoms are oriented in space. Models such as valence bond theory and VSEPR theory explain how electron pairs repel one another and influence molecular geometry. For example, the bent shape of the water molecule leads to polarity, which in turn explains water's high boiling point and its ability to dissolve many substances. Molecules can be polar or nonpolar, small or large, simple or complex, ranging from diatomic molecules to macromolecules like proteins and polymers. By understanding molecules and their structures, chemists can explain chemical reactions, predict how substances interact, and connect atomic-level behavior to the macroscopic properties of matter. This slide introduces Lewis symbols, also called Lewis electron dot symbols, which provide a simple and powerful way to represent the valence electrons of an atom. In a Lewis symbol, each valence electron is shown as a dot placed around the chemical symbol of the element. Because chemical reactions involve primarily valence electrons, Lewis symbols help us visualize how atoms bond and interact. For example, sulfur has the electron configuration like this one, meaning it has 6 valence electrons. In its Lewis symbol, sulfur is written as capital S with 6 dots around it, representing those 6 valence electrons. An important convention in drawing Lewis symbols is that dots are placed singly around the symbol before any pairing occurs, reflecting Hund's rule. The only common exception is helium, which has just 2 valence electrons that are always paired, forming a stable duet. Let's try a couple of examples. Draw the Lewis symbol of neon. How many valence electrons does neon have? That's 8. Neon is a noble gas. Therefore, the Lewis symbol of neon is as follows. Draw the Lewis symbol of boron. How many valence electrons does boron have? That's 3. Therefore, the Lewis symbol of boron is as follows. These are the Lewis symbols of the second period elements in the periodic table. Lewis symbols are connected to the octet rule, a foundational concept in chemistry. The octet rule states that atoms tend to gain, lose, or share electrons until they are surrounded by 8 valence electrons, achieving a noble gas electron configuration. This explains why noble gases like neon already appear with 8 dots in their Lewis symbols and are chemically unreactive. In contrast, elements such as boron or chlorine show fewer than 8 dots and therefore tend to participate in bonding. A chlorine atom has 7 valence electrons, which is 1 electron short of an octet. This explains its strong tendency to gain 1 electron by forming a single bonding pair, also called single bond. As you can see, each chlorine atom in the chlorine molecule, Cl2 now, has 8 valence electrons, satisfying the octet rule. Overall, Lewis symbols provide a clear visual link between electron configuration, the octet role, and chemical reactivity, setting the stage for understanding ionic bonding, covalent bonding, and molecular structure. Lewis symbols are used to represent the formation of molecular bonds, providing a simple but powerful way to visualize how atoms share electrons to form molecules. We begin with the idea that a molecular bond forms when two atoms share one or more pairs of valence electrons. In Lewis notation, each valence electron is represented by a dot. When two atoms approach one another, an unpaired electron from each atom can be shared, forming a shared electron pair. For example, two hydrogen atoms, each with one valence electron, share their electrons to form an hydrogen-hydrogen bond. In Lewis symbols, this shared pair may be shown as two dots between the atoms, or more commonly as a single line. The line is simply a shorthand representation of a shared pair of electrons. A similar process occurs when two chlorine atoms bond to form Cl2. Each chlorine atom has 7 valence electrons and shares one electron with the other atom, forming a single bond. After bonding, each chlorine atom achieves an octet. In Lewis structures, shared electron pairs are represented by lines, while unshared electron pairs, also called lone pairs, remain as dots around the atom. The Lewis structures of molecules such as HF and NH3 illustrate that not all valence electrons participate in bonding. Fluorine in HF shares one electron with hydrogen to form a single bond, while the remaining 6 electrons on fluorine appear as 3 lone pairs. In ammonia, or NH3, nitrogen forms 3 single bonds with hydrogen atoms and retains 1 lone pair. These lone pairs play an important role in molecular shape and chemical reactivity, even though they are not directly involved in bonding. Multiple bonds occur when atoms share more than one pair of electrons. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is shown as an example of double bonding, in which carbon shares 2 pairs of electrons with each oxygen atom. In this structure, each atom satisfies the octet rule, forming 2 CO double bonds. Each nitrogen atom in N2 has 5 valence electrons and shares 3 pairs of electrons with the other nitrogen atom. This sharing gives each nitrogen atom a full octet and results in the formation of a triple bond. Triple bonds involve the sharing of 3 electron pairs and are typically very strong. When one pair of electrons is shared, the bond is a single bond. When 2 pairs are shared, it is a double bond as seen in the 2 CO double bonds in carbon dioxide. And when 3 pairs are shared, it is a triple bond as in the nitrogen-nitrogen triple bond in N2. Overall, this slide demonstrates how Lewis symbols and Lewis structures provide a clear visual framework for understanding how atoms share electrons to form single, double, and triple bonds in molecules. This slide introduces the different ways chemists represent compounds, moving from symbolic descriptions to 3-dimensional models that better reflect molecular structure and shape. At the most basic level, chemical and structural formulas show how atoms are connected and the types of bonds between them. For example, the structural formula of hydrogen peroxide H2O2 shows an oxygen-oxygen single bond with each oxygen also bonded to a hydrogen atom. Note that each oxygen has 2 lone pairs of electrons. In some drawings, the arrangement of bonds is adjusted to suggest molecular geometry, reminding us that molecules are not flat but exist in 3 dimensions. Similarly, the structural formulas of carbon dioxide, CO2, and nitrogen, N2, clearly indicate the types of bonds present. Carbon dioxide contains 2 CO double bonds, while nitrogen consists of a strong nitrogen-nitrogen triple bond. These structural formulas help us understand connectivity and bonding, but still provide a simplified, mostly two-dimensional view of molecules. To better visualize molecular shape, chemists use molecular models, which represent molecules in different levels of detail. A structural formula shows which atoms are bonded, but not the true three-dimensional arrangement. A perspective drawing improves on this by using solid and dashed wedges to indicate bonds coming out of or going into the plane of the page, giving a clearer sense of spatial orientation. The ball and stick model represents atoms as balls and bonds as sticks, making bond angles and molecular geometry easy to see, although atomic sizes are not to scale. In contrast, the space-filling model represents atoms as spheres sized according to their relative atomic radii, emphasizing how atoms actually occupy space and how molecules interact with one another. Together, these representations, from formulas to models, provide complementary ways to describe molecular composition, bonding, shape, and spatial structure, all of which are essential for understanding chemical behavior. Valence shell electron pair repulsion theory, or VSEPR theory, is a simple yet powerful model used to predict the three-dimensional shapes of molecules. The central idea of VSEPR theory is that electron groups, which include lone pairs, single bonds, multiple bonds, and even single electrons, repel one another due to electrostatic or Coulombic forces. Because these negatively charged regions repel each other, they arrange themselves around a central or interior atom in a way that maximizes their separation. As a result, the geometry of a molecule is determined primarily by the number of electron groups surrounding the central atom, not by the identity of the surrounding atoms themselves. These are the 5 basic electron group geometries that arise from different numbers of electron groups. An electron group is symbolized by a balloon. With 2 electron groups, the geometry is linear, placing the groups 180 degrees apart to minimize repulsion. With 3 electron groups, a trigonal planar geometry forms with 120-degree bond angles. 4 electron groups arrange themselves into a tetrahedral geometry with bond angles of about 109.5 degrees, which provides a maximum separation in 3 dimensions. When there are 5 electron groups, the geometry becomes trigonal bipyramidal, featuring 90-degree and 120-degree angles, while 6 electron groups lead to an octahedral geometry with 90-degree angles between adjacent groups. Importantly, it should be emphasized that not all electron groups repel equally. Lone pair repulsions are strongest, followed by lone pair bonding pair, and then bonding pair interactions. This hierarchy explains why lone pairs often distort ideal bond angles and why molecular shapes may differ from the ideal electron group geometries. Together, these principles allow us to predict and rationalize molecular shapes and bond angles across a wide range of compounds. This slide builds on VSEPR theory by showing how 5 basic electron group geometries serve as the foundation for predicting both ideal and derived molecular shapes. As a reminder, VSEPR theory states that electron groups around a central atom arrange themselves to minimize repulsion, resulting in a predictable 3-dimensional geometry. the 5 basic geometries: linear, trigonal planar, tetrahedral, trigonal bipyramidal, and octahedral, are determined solely by the number of electron groups surrounding the central atom, regardless of whether those groups are bonding pairs or lone pairs. These ideal geometries represent the maximum separation of electron groups in space. The table illustrates each of these basic geometries using chemical formulas, structural formulas, ball and stick models, and space filling models. For example, CO2 has 2 electron groups around the central carbon atom, giving it a linear geometry with a bond angle of 180 degrees. BH3 has 3 electron groups and adopts a trigonal planar geometry with 120-degree bond angles. CH4, with 4 electron groups, forms a tetrahedral geometry with bond angles of about 109.5 degrees. When there are 5 electron groups, as in PF5, the geometry becomes trigonal bipyramidal, and with 6 electron groups, as in SF6, the geometry is octahedral. The ball and stick models emphasize bond angles and connectivity, while the space-filling models highlight the relative sizes of atoms and how molecules occupy space. Note that many familiar molecular shapes are derived geometries, formed when one or more electron groups are lone pairs rather than bonding pairs. For instance, when a tetrahedral electron group geometry contains one lone pair, as in NH3, the molecular shape becomes trigonal pyramidal. When there are one lone pair on a trigonal planar arrangement, as in NO2-, the shape becomes bent. These derived shapes arise because lone pairs exert stronger repulsive forces than bonding pairs, compressing bond angles and altering the observed molecular geometry. By recognizing the underlying electron group geometry and accounting for lone pairs, VSEPR theory allows us to systematically predict both ideal and real molecular shapes, making it a fundamental tool for understanding molecular structure and chemical behavior. Now, let's try an online activity to reinforce our understanding of molecular structures. Log in to the course site on D2L. Click the Content tab at the top. In the left menu, open Lecture Material, then select the module titled 14 Molecules. Under that module, find Lab 14 Molecules and download the lab worksheet. Complete it as you work through the online simulation. Return to D2L and, under the same module, open Simulation Molecules. In the simulation, select the single window. Note the baskets of atoms at the lower center of the page and the collection of boxes for dropping molecules on the right side. You may click the right and left arrow buttons in the baskets window to move between different sets of atoms. Let's build a water molecule for practice. Drag and drop an oxygen atom from its basket to the empty center of the page. Drag and drop 2 hydrogen atoms next to the oxygen atom. Make sure the name of the molecule is displayed. Drag and drop the completed molecule into the designated box on the right. Click the small 3D icon. Check the 2 icons at the bottom of the 3D window. By clicking these icons, you can switch between the space-filling model and the ball and stick model. Scroll down to the table listing various molecules and repeat the same procedure in the simulation to build each molecule and identify its molecular geometry. You may also click the multiple and playground icons at the bottom to add more molecules to the simulation. Sketch both the space-filling model and the ball and stick model in the table. Try to show all atoms of each molecule in your sketches.